Welcome to the Sales Whisperer Podcast, Session 31. Are you flying solo? Welcome, everybody, to the 31st edition of the Sales Whisperer Podcast. This is Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, and I would like to send you $250 to $500 every week. You know what? Every day, as a matter of fact. If you visit referwes.com, R-E-F-E-R, referwes.com, and that's one S, W-E-S, and send me a referral for somebody that orders Infusionsoft from me. Depending on the package they buy, you'll get at least $250, up to $500, and I would be thrilled to send that to you every day of every week, of every month, of every year. So please keep that in mind. As if you're looking for a little pocket change, think of referwes.com. Today's guest is Rob Waldo Waldman. Rob is an Air Force Academy graduate like me. Good old alma mater, beat Army, beat Navy, but not this year. Oh, we're bad. But anyway, he is a combat veteran flying F-16s. We get into a little bit in this interview. 69 combat missions, flew for 11 years, and now has a very successful speaking, coaching, training business on peak performance. He is a New York Times best-selling author, and his words of wisdom are worth paying attention to. Enjoy today's interview. Lieutenant Colonel Rob Waldo Waldman, welcome to the Sales Whisperer Podcast.
Great to be here, Wes.
Thanks for taking the time, my fellow Zoomie. But for those of listeners that aren't fortunate enough yet to know about you, can you kind of give us a quick thumbnail background of your history and how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely. Well, I'm currently a leadership peak performance speaker. I graduated the academy with you, obviously, and then went off and spent 11 years active duty flying F-16s in the Air Force and 65 combat missions, the whole 9 yards. And then joined the reserve, got my MBA, and spent around, a bunch of years in sales and management, working for technology firms and merger and acquisitions. And then got into the speaking world, wrote a New York Times bestseller called Never Fly Solo about partnerships and commitment in business and life. And now I speak around 70 times a year across the country at national sales meetings and leadership meetings for companies like Exxon and Bank of America and Mass Mutual, all different types of companies, including the Denver Broncos, who I just spoke for a couple weeks ago, the entire football team, which was just a great experience. So been really blessed and love what I do.
Well, I'm a big fan of the Broncos right now because Peyton Manning threw to Wes Welker, or Derek Welker. I don't even know his name. I forget his name. I don't know. It gave me 54 fantasy points, so I'm a fan right now.
Yeah, it's Wes Welker. Wes Welker. Yeah, he's
there you go.
Great dude. Great guy.
And I got to learn your story, but it was interesting in that you are claustrophobic, but you flew and fly fighter jets. Can you walk people through, I think it's a great story, and just overcoming adversity and handling challenges that apply to every aspect of life, but can you kind of dive into that a little bit?
Absolutely, Wes. Well, every one of us, I don't care if you're an NFL football player or a fighter pilot or an entrepreneur in sales or whatever, we all have those hidden, latent challenges that hold us back from being all we can be, for lack of a better term. And as a fighter pilot, I loved flying. Things were going great for me. I was an instructor and then flying fighters. And long story short, I almost died in a scuba diving accident 3 years into my 11-year flying career. And it brought out this latent claustrophobia that I never thought I had. And flying one day, I just had a panic attack, 30,000 feet in the weather. I couldn't see the sun. I couldn't see the ground. And I'm like, I've got to get out of this plane. And every time I strapped into the jet to fly for the next 8 years of my 11-year flying career, I had to deal with this demon, this little devil that was on my shoulder, kind of threatening to hold me back. The fear, the doubt, the anxiety. And I'll tell you, nothing's worse than flying an 8-hour night combat mission in Iraq and Serbia strapped into the tiny little cockpit of an F-16. But I did it. My passion was greater than my fear. My commitment to the team, my responsibilities was greater than my fear. My love and excitement of flying fighters was greater than my fear. So we're all going to have those fears and doubts and anxieties, but when you focus on what you love, that love noise, that music is going to drown out the fear noise that holds us back. And that's one of the keys to staying motivated, to being resilient, to focus on what you love and to stay in the fight and not give up on that vision. It's not an easy thing to do, Wes, but the best champions deal with those inner wingman missiles that we often shoot at ourselves and still take action despite the fear. That's what peak performers do. I don't care if you're a fighter pilot or a salesperson or a leader.
Were you able to talk about that with anybody, or did you have to keep it to yourself?
You know, I couldn't talk about it with anybody. I spoke to my twin brother about it, my best friend about it. But I knew if I shared this with my compadres, my peers, they would probably send me to psychology and the counselor, and there was a very high chance of me getting my wings taken away. Now, here's the kicker, though. It never impacted my performance. I was flight leader of the quarter. I flew all my combat missions. I never quit on my responsibilities. And if it did impact my performance or was a factor to the safety of myself or my formation, I had every responsibility to turn myself in and say, I can't do this.
Right.
But my point is, we're all going to have those fears and doubts. If you can break through those fears, still perform at your peak, that's when you know you're courageous and are still able to make it happen. But mind you, Wes, it's never impacted my ability. I'd have these micro panic attacks. I'd break through it, and boom, I was off to the races and ready to go to battle. But if I lost focus, that's when that fear and panic crept up on me. But I don't think it was any different than having your crap scared out of you in a combat mission. It was the same thing,
When would this bubble up? Like, when you're suiting up, just as you step in, like at night,
Before the missions, mostly. Most of our fears are in our heads. Right. We start contingency planning all the threats, the emergencies. We start freaking ourselves out. So when I took off on the jet and released the brakes and was airborne, the toughest part was over.
Right.
So the key is strapping in, taking off, jumping off of that high diving board, making the cold call, getting in, doing the presentation, doing the speech, whatever it is. That's the key. Get out there and take the action. And now, when you prepare, though, when you're confident in your skills, when you have a good team, when you've done all the hard work before you strap in and fly, that will also help you deal with the fear. That's why I was successful. Any salesperson listening to this podcast, or a parent, or somebody in sports, preparation leads to power. Power builds trust, and the most important wingman there is, yourself. So if you're flying by the seat of your pants doing a presentation, flying a jet, or playing sports, or doing a cold call, you're going to be afraid, and that fear is going to bubble up. So my biggest tool was my preparation, which built confidence and trust in myself.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm rewriting my 7 deadly sins of selling, and number one is what I call anti-Oakleyitis, which is shooting from the hip, which is what most salespeople do. And I was fortunate enough to kind of see behind the scenes of what y'all do as fighter pilots, and it looks all glamorous, but you're doing hours of preparation and then hours of debriefing just for what might be a 1-hour flight. And most salespeople, until I treated selling as a true profession, I just shot from the hip. But you're right. Once I had things scripted out and understood the objections and how to prevent them from coming up, how to address them if they did, I was much more confident in picking up the phone and setting appointments and hitting my goals.
Absolutely, you're exactly right. I have a saying: wingmen never wing it. If you fly by the seat of your pants, I don't care what you do, your likelihood is getting shot down. And, I don't care. I speak 70 times a year. I do very well in my business. I love sales. But preparation is the key, and you've got to do the hard work. You've got to differentiate. And confidence is a mindset, but it's a byproduct of the work and the efforts and the preparation that you do. So, and that has to constantly be reinforced. And one of the things I always mention in my programs is being relevant. And when I say relevant, it means doing the research. It means doing using social media and gathering information and intel on your prospects. It means attending the latest, greatest classes and seminars, listening to podcasts and signing up on your training that you do, that you offer, and it's great stuff. So you got to sharpen your sword. If you're not relevant, if you're complacent, you will be killed. That's a fact.
Why do you think people don't prepare? Is it just, you think they're just stuck like in a dead end job? They're just, the passion isn't there, so they don't do what needs to be done?
Well, I think that's part of it. Many people kind of rest on the laurels of yesterday's wins. A lot of the folks, as fighter pilots, we couldn't take for granted the fact that we were the best fighting force. And we always had updates in software, updates in training and tactics. And if you fell behind, I don't care if you were good last week or yesterday. If you're not up to date on the latest tactics and are really, really relevant to that day's mission, your chances of getting, quote unquote, shot down or getting your butt kicked are big. So some people are lazy, period. Lazy loafers will get shot down. That's number one. Number two, well, like I said before, some people are relying on their past wins. They think yesterday's win is going to hold them through today. And number three, they don't have a team holding them accountable, reminding them. In particular, entrepreneurs, Wes, which we both are, no one's sitting in our office telling us to read the seminar, attend this training, practice our presentations, or do research. So I think it's important to have accountability groups, either formal or informal ones, mastermind groups, for lack of a better word. Folks that'll say, hey, Wes, did you meet your goals today? What's the latest sales book that you read? What's your flight plan tomorrow? What calls are you going to make? I mean, those things are very, very important. And this is where the Wingman philosophy of performance really is relevant. Because when you have others holding you accountable, reminding you, lifting you, challenging you, calling your BS, calling your bluff, hey, you're going to do a lot better as well. That's a big reason why I love Flying Fighters. Everybody was hardcore and in the fight, demonstrating excellence, not just philosophizing about it.
Yeah, and the other cool thing, I got to sit through a lot of debriefings. And, similar to when I got good at golf, is when I started taking lessons where they filmed me. And when I got good at selling is when I recorded my calls and I had a coach break those down with me, because y'all film every flight, right? So, I mean, that's what the whole debrief, again, you may have a 1 hour mission and a 20 hour or a 5 or 10 minute engagement, but you may break down that 10-minute engagement for hours. How can business people get that type of insights, and it's got to be a wingman, I guess, right? It's got to be somebody sitting there with them, looking over their shoulder, kicking them in the butt.
Well, ideally, that's important. But many times when I'm making my calls now, I do it on my own. I've had coaches. I've had speech coaches. I've had sales coaches. Many times the quote-unquote coach can be the book that you just read, the seminar, the telecast, or whatever you're going to do. And I want to touch in on the debriefing, which is important, but also the pre-briefing is also important. Setting an objective for the day, gathering research on a prospect, having a plan of action to get you through the day. I don't care if you're in sales or consulting or manufacturer's rep, whatever it is. You have that pre-planned strategy, the flight plan that gets you through the day, the week, the month, the year. So you have to you can't be all thrust and no vector, right? You can't be flying along the place. You have to have a direction to your day, to your business. So I'm just going to be interviewed by the book "The One Thing" by the author or the founder of Keller Williams. Gary Keller, great book. And he says, what is that one thing you can do, that leverage point that if you did it today or this week, that will make everything else easier? So find those key items, that one item or two top items that you need to do every day. So that preparation, the briefing pre-mission planning is important. And then, like you said before, now we debrief. We break down our day. We break down the sales call, the keynote speech, the sales presentation, whatever. And we critique ourselves, ideally, and then we have somebody else looking at it. Many of the mistakes that we make, I think we can catch a lot of them. And I was an instructor pilot. You do a lot of coaching in your house, and you're always doing that stuff with people. You're a wingman. You're a paid professional, which is great. Many times I think people can catch their own mistakes. When you listen to your own call, when I listen to my own keynote speeches or watch me on stage, man, I'm cringing half the time. And if I'm smiling, I'm loving it, I know I'm doing something right. So debrief yourself. Don't always rely on somebody else, but then have those trusted partners who can provide that perspective. Call out the blind spots that you may have due to your limitations or lack of training. And then, most importantly, Wes, and this is important for your listeners, to be open to the feedback that you may not want to hear, but need to hear.
Right.
To be willing to have your ego bruised and to be willing to take action that may not be easy to take. And I think as fighter pilots, when we debriefed, man, the missiles came out, the steam came from under that door, that room, and you better have an ego in check. Otherwise, you're not going to grow. And we all have sales scars, right?
Sure.
We have, what is it? PTSD, post-traumatic sales disorder.
Yep.
Right? And we really grow from our coaches and wingmen, like you mentioned.
So you mentioned being a best-selling author, and speaking is what you do now. Can you talk about those two things? Because those are the biggies I'm always encouraging my listeners to do. Speak more and to write more.
I'll tell you what. I was just coaching somebody this morning who's in real estate and corporate relocation. She wants to coach executives and on how to get into that, save them money and all that. So long story short, I said, you've got to write. Writing demonstrates credibility. It improves your outreach and maximizes your outreach to prospects, shows you're relevant in modern day business. And you don't shoot for the moon. You're not going to try to get in Harvard Business Review first try. Write for your newsletter, just like you do with your newsletter and your blog, which is great. And then contact local associations that are within your niche. If you're in accounting or insurance or financial services or software sales, find a small boutique association where they have a digital newsletter or a print newsletter and say, look, I'm a professional. I'd love to show my proficiency and write an article, 600 or 1,000 words or whatever. And leverage that. And that gets you out there in social media. It gets you out there on the web. Demonstrates credibility. You can use that as part of your marketing when you get a digital PDF of it, etc. So really use that, and that's how I built my book. Now, not everybody's going to be an author or a New York Times bestseller, but boutique writing, targeted writing, will get you out in the industries, demonstrate competence and credibility, and get people on your radar, and vice versa.
And then did you seek out speaking gigs, or were you invited and then kind of said, oh, wow, this is something to explore? I mean, how did you...
I call it getting a mini MBA in speaking. I'd say a major MBA. I have an MBA, but it wasn't as hard as all the research and time and prospecting and cold calling I did learning my industry. So for the first 4 years, Wes, as a speaker, and mind you, I was cold calling in mergers and acquisitions, making $0 or $40,000 a month in tax consulting. I was selling technology sales, working with value-added resellers, partners, channel sales, and defense contracting. So I had experience in sales, but when I became a speaker, I had to recreate it all. I studied my competition. I modeled them. I didn't mimic them. I modeled them. I found out what worked. I found out what didn't. I joined the National Speakers Association. I eventually became president of my local chapter. Now I'm on the national board. You've got to be around like-minded individuals in your industry, in your craft. Show up, shake hands, be relevant, help other people. Be around those other top guns, and they'll eventually lead you to the promised land, so to speak. So that's really important. And I cold called the living heck out of my prospects, and I did very well at it. because I had my plan every day. I practiced what I preached. I sent handwritten notes, got marketing materials, got demo videos and all that stuff. But it took a lot of time. And now, fortunately, my phone rings. I do very little outbound. I do a little bit, but very little. And I'm lucky that people are prospecting. I got some leads on LinkedIn, which I hardly ever get. Even Facebook has been sending me leads. I've been on that for years, and I've never really gotten any leads. Now they're coming in on that, and it also shows that you're relevant as well. So you got to start small, but don't take it for granted. Build that expertise, do the hard work, and things will eventually come together. What I'm talking about here, Wes, are fundamentals, nothing cosmic. The fundamentals are what get you booked as a speaker and build your business and whatever you do.
Oh, I thought you were going to say just put up a WordPress page and make a video from my webcam, and I would just get $10,000 offers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and if people are selling that dream. So many folks, and you've been in this business, Wes. There's a lot of folks out there who think that are teaching seminars, and even in my industry, here, become $1 million speaker. Most of these folks, they're talking about the technology, the back end, even using Infusionsoft like you, which I also use. That stuff is not going to cut it. You've got to work with your engine of your car first before you start making sure the paint is shiny. People are worried about the paint and the color without the engine. The engine is the speech. Your engine is your consulting, the competence, the diamond of content that you have. Work on that, and everything else will build from that.
Cool. What would you say to folks listening, maybe with a military background, that are wondering if they're cut out to be an entrepreneur? Because I've run across a lot of military people. It's beat into our head to follow orders, right? And then to get out on your own, there may not be any orders to follow. Right? You got to make it as you go. What would you say to those folks, to encourage them that they do have what it takes, that the military did give us a great foundation?
Exactly right. It gave us a great foundation. But just like when you showed up at basic training or went to your operational squadron, you had to earn your wings, and you had to earn them every day. So these leaders, and I think all the military folks are leaving. I don't care if you're enlisted or whatever, or an officer. You leave as a leader, but you have to fly your aircraft now. You've got to take charge of your training. You've got to network. I call it wing working. Get out there, demonstrate your competence, meet people. You've got to go through basic training in business. Just because you had a past doesn't mean it's going to necessarily take care of your future. So it's incumbent upon these veterans to get in the trenches again. Now, they have the work ethic. They have the integrity. They have a lot of the technical competence, but it doesn't come to them. They got to get out there. They've got the tools, but they still need to work on putting the stuff together. So I always tell them to do what everybody else needs to do to build a business. But entrepreneurs that are former military, I'll tell you what, they have that core work ethic, the values, those essentials necessary to win. Whereas somebody who may have more competence but lacks the ethics, the integrity, the accountability, that work ethic will get shot down a lot faster than somebody like a veteran who's out there in the trenches learning business.
Right. I know your time is short tonight. I appreciate you rescheduling. What would you say is kind of some parting words of wisdom you'd want to leave our listeners with?
I think, number one, really, really, stay visual on what you love. Your family, your commission checks, your charity, your dream home, your music, your business. I have a saying, or there's a saying in the military, lose sight, lose fight. If you lose sight of that goal, that objective, the passion, you're going to get shot down. And if you don't love what you're doing right now, if it doesn't excite you to get in the office every day, man, life is too short. Get involved with something that you love. And sometimes it means realizing there's other people that you're serving in the process. That'll also get you in the game again, especially people who are very experienced business people who've been in the trenches for a long time. They lose the meaning and the mission. And when you lose that meaning, that's when you get shot down. So focus on those that you're serving, your family, other people in your industry. So that's number one. Number two, don't be afraid to ask for help. Elizabeth Dole, when she was head of the Red Cross, said, I didn't wait for the rivers to flood before I built relationships. And the reason why she was so successful as head of the Red Cross, the way leaders are successful, is they build relationships with people before they need them. So when they call out Mayday or I need help, the wingman's call to action, people are there for you. And it means taking off your masks. It means humbling yourself, getting your ego out of the way, acknowledging your insecurities, and building relationships with folks who are going to be there to lift you out of the dungeon that we often hang out in, either 5 minutes a day or every week or wherever you're at. So ask for help. And by giving your wings away and being a resource to other people, by volunteering your time, by being what I call a wing giver, that's also a great way to develop those relationships as well. That's very, very important. And then last and not least, build a team around you of folks that are yes men and not yes men and yes women, folks that are going to be brutally honest with you, that enlighten you, not in the business world only, but also in your personal life. Many people have wingnut moments on the weekends. They hang out with folks that drag them down rather than lift them up. So be careful who those folks are that you're spending time with, and then choose your wingman very, very carefully, because they're the ones that are going to be there for you and challenge you to grow, step out of your comfort zone, and take your business and your personal life to newer heights.
Yeah, very nice. So people can find you at yourwingman.com, right?
Roger that. Yourwingman.com. They can sign up for my newsletter. I have a peak performance newsletter, and they can sign up and get a great newsletter, a selling power article on some key tips on building a high performance team and preparing for sales contingencies. And if they know of some folks out there, some companies that need a speaker for a sales or leadership meeting, they can drop me a note there as well. And if I can help them out, they can drop me a note on my website in the contact us page, and I'd love to connect with them. All
right. Sounds very good. Thanks for taking a few minutes and sharing your advice and your wisdom.
I really enjoyed the interview. Sales Whisperer, I love that brand. You're a great man. I love how you continuously sharpen your sword, and I wish you the best as we push up the throttles in 2014, Wes.
All right. Let's go get them.
God bless you, buddy.
All right. You too. Thanks, Waldo.
Bye-bye.
There you have it. No wing nuts on the weekend. Now, that does not apply to like buffalo wings. That's okay. But no wing nuts. You know what he means. I thought that was some great advice. The cool thing doing these interviews, I'm in the moment when I'm interviewing these guys, but I get to go back and re-listen and type out my notes from the conversation and just get so much more out of it. We talked about staying in the fight. When I wrote the 7 Deadly Sins of Selling, number 7 is quitting just before striking gold. And he talked about, stay at it, follow your dreams, your passion, and stick with it. Get through the tough times to emerge victorious. He talked about peak performers staying in the fight despite their fears. One thing I have always talked about in my sales training is that your actions bring about the desired feelings. It's not the other way around. People always say, when I feel better or whatever, I'll start my prospecting, my marketing. No. Go out. The activity produces the feeling. Now, I'm not saying be stupid about what you do and inefficient and run around like a gong, but you know what to do. You're avoiding what you know you need to do, and that's what's bringing about the bad feelings, the negative feelings, the lack of energy and drive. So do what you need to do. It's just like going to the gym. How many times do you not feel like going to the gym, but after you do, you're so glad you did? It's the same in building your business. Okay? Stay in the fight. Move ahead despite the fears. It was amazing. He talked about having that fear of claustrophobia, and he's in this small fighter jet, in the soup, they like to call it, in the clouds and the fog, no visibility, relying on instruments. But it usually struck him in the beginning. The fear of the activity was greater than just going out and doing it. It's the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. So he would push through that. And again, the actions of strapping in the jet, pushing it forward, and launching made the fears go away. So get out there and do what you need to do, and take notice of how much better you feel when you're doing it. I love how I talked about wingmen never wing it. I talk about that with anti-oakleitis, shooting from the hip. It's the number one of the 7 deadly sins. The pre-planning is so important, and it's hard as entrepreneurs for that pre-planning. We like to blow and go. And I still am that way to a large degree, but as I get older, I don't know if I mature, but I'll say as I get older, I'm getting better at cooling my jets a bit, making sure my ducks are in a row before we launch, proofreading things one more time, checking the links one more time. But again, I'd always caution you or encourage you to err on the side of lack of caution. If that's what's holding you back is you're majoring in the minors, then pull the trigger and ride the bullet. Okay, get going. As he mentioned in there, you can be your own wingman. So if you don't have a networking event or a group or a mastermind group, or you can't afford a coach or a mentor, you can keep track of what you're doing and hold yourself accountable. You can get free podcasts. You're doing it right here, but you can get others. I grew up on Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and Tom Hopkins, all those guys, Jim Rohn. So all those guys have free content you can listen to hold yourself accountable. But again, I think I talked about this before, but if there's not a group around you, and Adam Smith talked about this, he's got a church group, a men's group. So create one, create a free group and invite people to hold yourselves accountable. Okay. That's the best way, the surest way to succeed. The old adage, you can't read the label from inside the bottle. So get yourself some outside help. As always, I hope you enjoyed this. Please leave a comment and feedback on iTunes. Visit thesaleswhisper.com/session31 for notes, for links to yourwingman.com, links to let Waldo and me know what you thought of the interview on Twitter. Leave a comment on the website. Help us spread the word to help others succeed. Doing this just before Christmas, so if you're listening to it immediately after I launch it, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and good selling.